Self-love seems like a trite concept because we've been using it in the self-help industry for so long. I mean, literally, it's nauseating. I'm just going to have to be honest with you. I don't like theoretical spirituality. It drives me nuts. So when people come, parachute down with their little fairy wings to people who are suffering and say things like, you just have to love yourself more. Even I want to punch them out. So basically what we've got here is a fundamental principle which ultimately is 100 times more intense as a spiritual practice than most people are prepared for. I'll give you an example of what I mean. People think self-love and they think, oh, give yourself a bath or do, something like positive affirmations about yourself. No, I'm talking radical self-love, which really is about making drastic changes to the way that you're living life. I'll give you one example. You live your life according to the question, what would someone who loves themselves do in every single situation? And that's easy when what would someone who loves themselves do if it's sitting in a restaurant like, oh, do I decide between the rice bowl or the omelet? That's pretty, okay. So, but what about what would someone who loves themselves do is about quitting your job or staying in it? What happens if it's about whether you should continue with the relationship or not? Well, I mean, it literally, living according to self-love becomes an accelerated path of self-development. Where you're continuously choosing in favor of what's best for you, continually choosing in the favor of what feels like relief, to a degree where you're just so on board, literally so on board with the way that the universe is taking your expansion path, that you get to a point where there is nothing left except for an enlightened state.
What if there's not an easy answer, though? Like, do I quit my job or not? It's like, I can see pros and cons to both. What would someone that loves themselves do? Well, if I love to eat, I might stay. And if I love to sort of adventure, then I might go. And I'd kind of like both.
This is being trapped in the mind space.
Totally.
It's the difference between thinking about what's best for someone and feeling into it. So I'll give you an example. So it's more difficult for us to figure out self-love, easier for us to think about a child. Let's say you've got a tiny baby. As a mother to this child, I may be able to conceptualize of what this child needs mentally. I might say, oh, they need food. Oh, they need to be changed. But if I'm not tapped in emotionally to that child's state, I can't actually know on an emotional level whether they want to be cuddled or whether they want to eat. I'm guessing. So what you just gave me is a guessing game. It's basically my mind is going to line up all these reasons why to stay and all these reasons why to go. This is not what I'm talking about. It's a very emotional experience, and this is why one of the things that I have people do is use this on stuff that makes no sense, like going into a grocery store and picking up an apple or an orange. What would someone who loves themselves do, apple or orange? Because the question basically just forces you to notice in your body the actual preference. You don't know why. I mean, here's the reality. You have no idea when you ask that question why you would rather have an orange than an apple. There's no explanation for that, but your emotional space basically says this is my inclination and this is the answer. Same with like doing intuition walks. You walk out of your house and you say, okay, right or left, what would someone who loves themselves do? You don't know why that's the answer, right or left. You're not saying, oh, because this way is a waterfall I want to go to. You're literally just saying, I have no idea, but the answer in me is basically right. So you're operating according to your higher perspective when you're doing that. Because let's say that recently you've been asking for, let's go really physical. Let's say you've been asking for a certain shirt. You want to wear a certain shirt. Now the universe up here from this perspective sees exactly where that shirt is, but you don't know where it is. But if you're living according to this emotional experience of what would someone who loves themselves do, which is ultimately, it's like a conceptual way of teaching yourself to follow intuition completely, then you're essentially letting the universe, which is your higher self, drag you in the direction of things that you've been wanting. So let's say that you have no idea why the answer was right today, but you keep asking that question and you get led straight to the window where that shirt is being sold. That's the kind of experience you start having when you do this. And so when you ask that question, and this is ultimately really living. I mean, it's the difference between I'm living the best that I can and really living. Because you get to a point where you ask that question, what would someone who loves themselves do relative to quitting the job or staying in the job? And maybe your entire mind is saying, these are all the reasons why you're not going to quit your job. And yet your heart is saying, yes, I am. You make that decision, it changes everything for you.
Yeah.
And this is what I want. There needs to be a partnership between the mind and the heart, a partnership between emotion and logic. But that partnership, it doesn't exist in people yet. You know, the mind is supposed to be the supportive act for the emotion. If the emotion says, you know what, I just know it right now, what would someone who loves themselves do? Quit the job. Then the mind's job is to figure out how to make that work. That's the mind's job. The mind's job is not
and of course the mind is leading in the majority of people's lives, right?
Yeah, because this is what we teach children. Children are not born this way. Children are born, I don't know how much time you spend with them, but children are literally born, and from day one, it's not difficult to get them to figure out what they want.
Right.
They go, oh, I'm going in this direction because it feels good. I'm going towards this thing because it feels good. It is us that says what you're deciding with your heart is wrong. We are the ones that intervene in this process. We are the ones that teach people to distrust their heart and to let their mind lead them, because we are trying to make ourselves more comfortable. And that is the real reality and the damage of socialization. The damage of socialization is the process of saying, you know, I don't want to feel bad, so I'm going to tell you how to behave so I feel good, and it doesn't matter what you feel. You're going to abandon that to what I tell you is right here in society and wrong here in society.
Yeah. So, do you think that's why this self-love process is so hard for people? Socialization, society?
Yeah, I do. Yep. Because this is the thing. You're born as this being who is a pure, let's say, reflection of source consciousness. You do not come here with issues of self-worth. A baby's not born saying, I don't deserve milk. Oh, I should be so glad my mom's paying attention to me. We are born in a state of self-love. We come into a society that is threatened by that. It is the society, it is our parents, it is those that raise the children that begin a process of corrosion of the self-concept. The parent says, gosh, you're so incredibly entitled. You should be so lucky. No, you don't get those things. This type of experience, which is nearly unanimous, basically, it cuts us down. And so we learn, and especially it depends on our society, but so many societies around the globe, let's just use a Christian society. Let's just use a Christian society because it's a really good example, and it's the one that most of us in the West are familiar with. In a Christian society, humility is king. So what happens when a child is demonstrating any kind of grandiosity of self? They are knocked off their pedestal. They are reminded where they stand. They are shamed for it. Now, basically, we are now giving somebody as a society a mixed message. We spend the first half of their life saying, you are not as great as you think you are. There are other people starving, around the planet. You should be, this kind of talk.
Right.
And teaching them that it is wrong and bad to have a high concept of self. It is self-centered. You never brag about yourself ever, ever. And now suddenly a person's 23 and struggling, and we say, you just need to love yourself more. But you have trained them not to. So now it's like, yeah, so I'm pretty excited for the way that we go about the process of socialization changing, because part of the reason that people in my line of work have such a difficult time is because you can't train someone for 25 years in that type of a process and then suddenly switch it up and wonder why it's not easy for people.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a total process of reprogramming, right?
Completely.